Hey everyone, how's it going? Komodi here. In this video, I want to show you an incredible synthesizer, Current 2.0. Current is made by Minimal Audio, who I've been a fan of for some time. I've really enjoyed using Rift, I've really enjoyed using Fuse, and I've really enjoyed using their Morph EQ. Current's obviously been on my radar, so when Minimal Audio reached out and asked if they could sponsor a video, obviously I said I would love to. So Minimal Audio Current is a really powerful synthesizer because it combines multiple types of synthesis and sampling with really powerful effects, including MIDI effects. It's got powerful modulation. It's integrated with their online platform Stream, so you can access presets and wavetables. I really like the wavetable aspect personally. And it's all put together in a way where I find you can achieve really powerful sounds without necessarily needing to spend a lot of time configuring the synth to do these complex level of processing and modulation. So in this video, I want to give you a walkthrough through the synth, a bit of a beginner's guide, including my thoughts, just so you know how to navigate it, get into it, and start to use this powerful tool. So in this engine section here, this is where you're going to get your two oscillators. You're going to get your granular synthesizer. You're going to get your sub oscillator. You're going to get your sampler. You get two filters that can run in series or in parallel. You get a really nice FM section, which includes FM, AM between the individual sound generators, as well as other sources like feedback, so it can do it to itself, noise, and even the filter section. There's also a mix window here where you can control the individual mix of each sound engine, a whole slew of powerful modulators, and some MIDI effects such as a chord tool and an arpeggiator. Let's start by taking a look at our first oscillator here. We already looked at the power toggle in the top left of all these devices as we were passing by them. And then here in this drop-down menu is where you're going to find your wavetables, including the ability to click here and find more through Stream. Below that, we're going to have pitch and other fundamental controls. So with this saw wave, I want to make a bass with it in this video, so I'm going to drop it down a couple octaves. One parameter here that I do want to bring to your attention is the ability to turn the fundamental on and off. So I'll show this over on our second oscillator here. We have this nice beefy bass, but if we turn the fundamental off, we just get these upper harmonics. You can hear the sub disappear out of that. This can be really nice to layer with an existing sub or another low sound like our saw here. Below that window, you're going to have your unison controls. Maybe on these nice mid-tones, I'm actually going to make them kind of wide. That sounds great to me. So this big knob right here, this is actually going to allow us to move through our wavetables, find new positions. So with this sound already, these wide mid-tones mixed with our squarey rounded sine here, this sounds excellent. Love that. If we wanted to further change these wavetables, we have two options to the left and to the right of that main wavetable position knob. Watch what this will do to our sound. And we have all these different options. So there's formant shapes, there's harmonic changes. I really like these. Oof, I love how bubbly that is. And then on the left here, we have other ways of manipulating the waveforms. So let's check out the sound of some of these. I really like that little movement in there. So let's actually bring in some modulation. And what we're going to do is I'm going to grab an LFO. I'm going to click, I'm going to drag it. Let's get that LFO moving on this warp as well. Excellent. Now there's other ways of getting sound in here as well. In this wavetable section, we can access more if we go to Stream here. So I can click on wavetables. And if I wanted some other ones, I could just assign it to oscillator A. So if I wanted to, I could import a wavetable if you had other wavetables from other synths, for example. I'm going to drag and drop one, however. So I'm going to take this bass sample. What I like about it is it just gives me 4 options. Sometimes I get overwhelmed when I have to create these wavetables in other synthesizers. In this case, it's just a really nice and quick importing system. So you can import an existing wavetable. I could slice an instrument, which is really nice for like organic sounds. I could slice a synth, or I can slice with pitch. So I can drop it in here, slice with pitch, right? D0, import, and we get it in our wavetable section just like that. Now I want to stay away from a bit of a metallic sound on this one, so I'm going to go back to one of our existing wavetables here. Even that alone sounds great. We have a few other options for sound. There's this granular section here where you can just load up samples. They have a bunch of existing ones. It can be really nice for a bunch of different types of sounds, such as noise and textures. This sound could use some high end, so let's check out the noise. That could be quite nice. Because this is a granular device, granular benefits from a lot of random modulation. So note that all these little white bars here give us the ability to set up a little bit of randomness to it. For a type of sound like this, I want a really consistent sound, so I'm not going to move that. But let's start to move like the position through the sound. Now what's really cool about this device, if we take this speed value right here and we drop it down to 0, what's going to happen is it's just going to loop part of this sound. Now, whatever position we move to is going to be very consistent. I like that texture right there. Now there's a filter here too, so we can get some bandpass movement through our sound. It's a really powerful granular device, so I recommend diving into it. But now I wanted to check out one of my favorite parts of this, and that's this subsection here. Now the subsection here, what I really like about it is you have a fundamental note, but then you have these upper partials which you can play around with. And I'm going to turn off these other 2 oscillators here. Notice how I did that just by clicking that. And the granular for now, just so we can take a look at this. So I can choose the amount of partials here, and I can pick from different types of subs here. So I like the harmonics in that. Now I can play with the balance of them with this knob here, which is really fun to modulate as well. And there's different ways we can play with those. That's bizarre. But I really like that. It also has this knock value, which is essentially punch. And we have different drive. I really like this pinch, so let's modulate that. And let's combine that with our other layers. Now we're cooking. If I want to add even more to this, we have an entire sampler. Now I used our granular for noise. Note there's also noise options in here too, so I could have done something similar in here. In this case, we don't actually need the sampler for this sound, but just know that it's there and it's really awesome. Now that we've got our sound sources set up, we can have them further interact with one another in this FM and AM section here. By default, all of them are set to feedback, which means they're going to be frequency modulating or amplitude modulating themselves, which on its own in small amounts can yield cool sounds. Ooh, I mean even add that to a macro. I highly recommend mapping your macros as you go too. It's because of this play section here, we can further play around with these macros and control everything. And let's have the sub amplitude modulate our grain so our noise flutters a bit. So before we talk about any of the effects, let's just talk about the modulation and the MIDI effects. Let's start by looking at our LFO. So right now everything's been mapped to this LFO here. And it's a pretty standard LFO, but there's a few things I really like about it. So it's really easy to just change the shape here. So for example, now we have a downward saw, which could further be shaped by this fade in or fade out. See how we add a bit of attack to that? Or what's really nice about it is this randomize function. When you have different shapes, like the square, it's a randomized position every time. Or the sine is a whole different shape. Look at that. I love the randomize feature, so much so that I'm going to do a whole video on making a randomized patch. So if you like this video, go check that one out. Now what I really like about the modulation too is at any point you can click this menu to change its type and it stays mapped. So we could turn it into another envelope. Curve, which allows you to manually draw your own shapes. I really like this feature. You get all these really cool shape options. You get this randomize option, so you can actually randomly change the shape. So that's a really cool option. Or you can even do an envelope follower. Right now though, let's just stick to the LFO. You have other modulators over here, such as key mapping, velocity, etc. Just so you know, those are all there as well. Now you can close this view or click the modulator to hide it, and then you get to see our MIDI effects here. On the right, you have some important controls. You want to pick what scale you're going to be working with for these MIDI effects. So for example, I'm going to be working in E minor. And below that, you have other important controls, such as how many voices you can use, legato, and glide, which will be really important for a bass sound like this. But heading on over to the left, if we want to, we could actually turn this into a chord. Now this isn't going to sound very nice with bass, and right now we are monophonic, but if I add more voices, you have the ability to strum it, and you can randomize. And above that, we have an arpeggiator. So check that out. So we can set the rate and we can set the rhythmic style. When you really get into this and you start playing with the chord and the arpeggiator, I find you get some really nice sounds. But let's start looking at the effects. So as mentioned, we have a couple filters here and they're pretty fun. You just turn them on, you choose what they're affecting. So in this case, I'm going to want both oscillators and the sub. And then we pick our type. There's some really fun ones in here in the creative section, in the format section, in the comb section. Let's just listen to a few of them. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to key map the cutoff so it scales, and we're going to get our movement going. Let's even have it morph it. If we want to have further options with the modulation as well, we can right click it and we can view the mod matrix. You can also access the whole mod matrix here. And what this allows us to do, for example, is we can have that modulation have a different ramp to it, which I quite like. So now we flick into the high end a little bit more. Now let's use the other filter, and I'm going to run this one in parallel because this one removed a little bit too much high end. I don't want this one to remove as much high end. So let's just work on this one now. Let's do this vowel. And let's find a nice shape. Ooh, I really like that. That's sounding good. So what I really like, throughout the synth, you'll see these clipping options. I'm going to turn soft clipping on. Okay, so let's start playing around with some of the effects. Now the effects are really nice because they integrate some of their existing plugins in a more condensed version into the device itself. So for example, their hybrid filter is basically Rift. And so I'm familiar with a handful of these. I thought that was really nice. So what I'm going to do is I want to get a bit more high end out of this sound. I'm going to bring in that polar distortion here to get a bit more out of our sound. There's this really nice squash knob that I just find is so fun to play with and just test out on sounds. And see what kind of textures we can get out of it. And just sweeping it just a little bit. Can be just a little bit more buzz. And I don't want it there the whole time. So I'm going to open it in the mod matrix. And I'm going to have it ramp. Now there's also this tone shaping down here so we can add more bass, which can sometimes help us hit the distortion even harder. And there's this resonance, which we can sweep through the sound to make it a bit more vocal. We can even tune it so the different positions on the frequency are actually tuned to note. Now that might be too much, so we can always bring it down the dry wet, or even sweep that as well with our one LFO. And if we want to here, we could do a bit more soft clip, but I think we can do without it. So there's tons of other cool effects. Some of them I've done full videos on, such as Rift, such as the Morph EQ. But we'll take a look at a couple others. So their fuse compressor is really nice. It's a multi-band compressor that does both downward and upward compression. But what I like about all these effects is we can go through the presets randomly. So I can find something that I kind of like. And then I can just dial it back to tape and change the parameters. Sounds crazy. And there's some other really fun ones. This wave shaper is really cool. You can do frequency shifting. You can do ring modulation. Frequency shifting for goopy sounds. Oh, I love that sweeping through the sound. Maybe it kind of ruins the sub a little, but let's just have a little bit. Actually, you know what? Let's modulate this so it gets drier, which means we get cleaner lows. But when it comes down, it gets a bit phasier. And let's change that shape. Our patch is taking shape. They've got other fun ones too, such as the flex chorus. What I like about the chorus is we can multi-band separate it so we can keep our lows nice and clean. We can go high feedback on it. Ooh, and we get this nice sound to it. I changed the style from smooth to glass. Oh, I love that. And if you change the time, we get kind of different characters. Turn modulation on. Or have it be random every time. That sounds great. Let's bring it back. Soft clip. Sounding great. And there's so many other devices, like the Morph EQ can add really nice movement to it. You got reverb. But let's get things a little crunchier. I love how far we can push things in this synth, but it just still sounds really nice. Actually, you know what? Let's get a bit of filter movement too. What I like about the filter is it's got a low crossover. So now we can keep our lows nice and clean. So you really got to check out all the other effects. There's some really fun ones in there. They work really well together, and it's nice to apply modulation across these effects when it's not something I ever thought I wanted to. What I mean by that is, again, I've had Rift and I've had, for example, Morph EQ, and I never really thought about how nice it would be to attach their modulation so they can be interconnected. But now I can just add Morph EQ in here, put it before Rift or their polar distortion, and now I can have this same LFO that's moving all these other parameters across effects, move parameters in here. See what I mean? It's just so nice. It just all works together so nicely. I love it. I mentioned the importance of mapping macros, and the reason that's nice is this play section takes presets, including the ones you're working on right now with the macros, and it gives us this playground where it's just X and Y map. But it allows us to approach those macros a bit more playfully. So I really like that aspect of it as well. Now lastly, there is the stream view where, again, you can, for example, switch out wavetables. So at this point, I could look up wavetables. And I'm going to apply that to oscillator B. I'm going to find another one for oscillator A. Oscillator A. So again, you can find wavetables, but you can also find presets, which is nice, where you can download entire packs, or you can download full sounds. So let's pick a pack. So these are all textures for grains and sampler, and you can just drop them in there. So if you ever feel like you do hit some sort of wall creatively, you have a lot more options that you can just dive into with this cloud feature. Really, those are the main aspects of Current 2.0. It's the synth that gives you really powerful sound generation tools, some really nice synths, some really nice samplers, really nice effects, and really nice modulation, all glued together with access to the cloud for sounds and presets as you need it to create this cohesive, creative synth, Current 2.0. So I want to say a huge Thank you again to Minimal Audio for sponsoring this video. If you like the look and sound of Current, go check it out in the description of this video. It would mean so much to me and of course to them. It is a really powerful synthesizer, and I know you will get a ton of creative sounds out of it. If you want to see me make a cool randomized bass patch with this device, check out this other video. Happy music making. Peace.